This article lists the post-Soviet conflicts, the violent political and ethnic conflicts in the countries of the former Soviet Union following its dissolution in 1991. Some of these conflicts, such as the 1993 Russian constitutional crisis or the 2013 Euromaidan protests in Ukraine, were due to political crises in the successor states. Others involved separatist movements attempting to break away from one of the successor states. According to Gordon M. Hahn, the post-Soviet conflicts led to the death of at least 196,000 people, excluding pogroms and inter-ethnic violence, between 1990 and 2013. Country comparison. The 15 states may be divided into 4 subregions. Not included in these categories are the several de facto independent states presently lacking international recognition. Current leaders. Heads of state. Heads of government. Economy. The dissolution of the Soviet Union took place as a result and against the backdrop of general economic stagnation, even regression. As the Gosplan, which had set up production chains to cross SSR lines, broke down, the inter-republic economic connections were also disrupted, leading to even more serious breakdown of the post-Soviet economies. Most of the formerly Soviet states began the transition to a market economy from a command economy in 1990–1991 and made efforts to rebuild and restructure their economic systems, with varying results. In all, the process triggered severe economic declines, with gross domestic product dropping by more than 40% overall between 1990 and 1995. This decline in GDP was much more intense than the 27% decline that the United States suffered in the wake of the Great Depression between 1930 and 1934. The reconfiguration of public finance in compliance with capitalist principles resulted in dramatically reduced spending on health, education, and other social programs, leading to a sharp increase in poverty and economic inequality. The economic shocks associated with wholesale privatization resulted in the excess deaths of roughly 1 million working-age individuals throughout the former Soviet bloc in the 1990s. A study by economist Stephen Rosenfield asserts that 3.4 million Russians died premature deaths from 1990 to 1998, partly as the result of shock therapy imposed by the Washington Consensus. The initial transition decline was eventually arrested by the cumulative effect of market reforms, and after 1995 the economy in the post-Soviet states began to recover, with GDP switching from negative to positive growth rates. By 2007, 10 of the 15 post-Soviet states had recovered and reached GDP greater than what they had in 1991. According to economist Branko Milanovic in 2015, many former Soviet republics and Warsaw Pact countries still have not caught up to their levels of output during the twilight of the Soviet era, including Bosnia-Herzegovina, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Serbia, Tajikistan, and Ukraine. He concluded that only 1 out of 10 people living in transition countries have seen a successful transition to capitalism and more democracy. Commenting on Milanovic's report in 2021, Kristen Godsey says this view is essentially correct and perhaps underestimates the negative impacts of transition by focusing only on GDP, inequality, and democratic consolidation, whereas Mitchell A. Orenstein says this view is overly pessimistic and notes that living standards had increased in many countries. The economic changes were in harmony with the constitutional reforms, while provisions on public finances can be identified, and in some countries, a separate chapter deals with public finances. Most of the constitutions define directly or indirectly the economic system of the countries parallel to the democratic transition of the 1990s, free market economy, which sometimes complemented with the social or socially oriented attribute, economic development, or only the economic rights are included as a ground for the economy. In the case of fiscal policy, the legislative, the executive and other state organs define and manage the budgeting. The average government debt in the countries is nearly 44%, but the deviation is great, because the lowest figure is close to 10% but the highest is 97%. The trend shows that the sovereign debt ratio to GDP in most of the countries has been rising. The constitutional background for taxation is similar. The contribution to cover the finances for common needs is declared. The principle of just tax burden sharing is supplemented sometimes with special aspects. Tax revenues expose typically 15–19% of the GDP, and rates above 20% only rarely can be found. The state audit of the government budget and expenditures is an essential control element in public finances, and an important part of the concept of checks and balances. The central banks are independent state institutions, which possess the monopoly on managing and implementing a state's or federation's monetary policy. Besides monetary policy, some of them even perform the supervision of the financial intermediary system. In the case of price stability function, the inflation rate, in the examined area, relatively quickly dropped to below 5% by 2000. The majority of the constitutions determine the national currency, legal tender or monetary unit. The local currency exchange rate to US dollars shows that drastic interventions were not necessary. National wealth or assets are the property of the state and/or the local governments, and as an exclusive property, the management and protection of them aim at serving the public interest. Change in gross domestic product in constant prices, 1991–2015. Economy of most Soviet republics started to decline in 1989–1990, thus indices for 1991 do not match pre-reform maximums. The year when GDP decline switched to GDP growth. List of the present gross domestic product. Developmental progress. The post-Soviet states listed according to their Human Development Index scores in 2021. Very high human development. Estonia, 0.890. Lithuania, 0.875. Latvia, 0.863. Russia, 0.822. Kazakhstan, 0.811. Belarus, 0.808. Georgia, 0.802. High human development. Ukraine, 0.773. Moldova, 0.767. Armenia, 0.759. Azerbaijan, 0.745. Turkmenistan, 0.745. Uzbekistan, 0.727. Medium human development. Kyrgyzstan, 0.692. Tajikistan, 0.685. Regional organizations. A number of regional organizations and cooperating blocs have sprung up since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Only organizations that are mainly composed of post-Soviet states are listed in this section. Organizations with wider memberships are not discussed. The 15 post-Soviet states are divided in their participation to the regional blocs. Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine founded the Commonwealth of Independent States in December 1991. It was conceived as a successor organization to the USSR, and in December 1993 it included 12 of the 15 former Soviet republics. It currently consists of 9 of the 15 former Soviet republics, with one associate state. Georgia withdrew from the CIS in August 2008, while Ukraine stopped participating from the CIS in May 2018. The 3 Baltic states have not sought membership in any of these post-Soviet organizations, seeking and achieving membership in the European Union and NATO instead, although their electricity and rail systems remain closely connected with former Soviet organizations. The sole exception to the above has been their recent membership in the Community of Democratic Choice. The Central Asian states of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan are members of the CIS and participate in several regional organizations that have Russia as a primary mover. Such organizations are the Eurasian Economic Community, Collective Security Treaty Organization, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The last two groups only became distinct once Uzbekistan withdrew from Guam and sought membership in Euraz-EC and CSTO. Armenia, besides its membership in CIS, participates in Collective Security Treaty Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union. Moldova and Azerbaijan participate in the CIS, but other than that they mostly cooperate within regional organizations that are not dominated by Russia. Such organizations are Guam and the Community of Democratic Choice. Although Ukraine is one of the three founding countries of the CIS, it is legally not a member because it has never ratified the 1993 CIS Charter. Turkmenistan is an associate member of CIS and a member in the Economic Cooperation Organization. It has not sought closer integration in any of the other Western or post-Soviet organizations. In 2008, Georgia notified the CIS executive bodies of its decision to leave the regional organization, and according to the CIS Charter this decision went into force 12 months after the notification date. Commonwealth of Independent States. The Commonwealth of Independent States consists of 10 former Soviet republics that differ in their membership status. As of December 2010, 9 countries have ratified the CIS Charter and are full CIS members. 1 country is an associate member and 2 countries left the organization in 2009 and in 2018. In 2014, Ukraine declined its CIS chairmanship and considered withdrawal from the organization. In 1994, the CIS countries agreed to create a free trade area, but the agreements were never signed. On October 19, 2011, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, and Ukraine signed a free trade agreement. Uzbekistan joined the Free Trade Area in 2013. Eurasian Economic Community. The Eurasian Economic Community, formerly the CIS Customs Union, was established by Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. Ukraine and Moldova have observer status in the community. However, Ukraine has declared its desire not to become a full member state. Because having common borders with the rest of the community is a prerequisite for full membership, Moldova is barred from seeking it. Uzbekistan applied for membership in October 2005, when the process of merging Central Asian Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Community began. It joined on January 25, 2006. Uzbekistan subsequently suspended its membership in 2008. On October 10, 2014, an agreement on the termination of the Eurasian Economic Community was signed in Minsk after a session of the Interstate Council of the EAEC. The Eurasian Economic Community was terminated from January 1, 2015 in connection with the launch of the Eurasian Economic Union. Customs Union of Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Russia. Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan created a customs union that entered into force in July 2010. Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan indicated interest in joining at the time. Russia has been eager for Armenia, Moldova, and Ukraine to join the Customs Union instead of the European Union, and the Moldovan breakaway state of Transnistria has supported this. In 2013, Kyrgyzstan and Armenia announced plans to seek membership, but division over the issue in Ukraine led to the Revolution of Dignity after the Ukrainian government backed out of an EU Eastern Partnership in favor of the Union. In 2014, voters in the Moldovan Autonomous Region of Gagauzia rejected closer ties to the EU in favor of the Union. On January 1, 2012, Russia, Kazakhstan and Belarus established the Single Economic Space, which ensures the effective functioning of a single market for goods, services, capital, and labor, and to establish coherent industrial, transport, energy, and agricultural policies. The agreement included a roadmap for future integration and established the Eurasian Economic Commission. The Eurasian Economic Commission serves as the regulatory agency for the Eurasian Customs Union, the Single Economic Space and the Eurasian Economic Union. Eurasian Economic Union. The Eurasian Economic Union is an economic union of post-Soviet states. The treaty aiming for the establishment of the EAEU was signed on May 29, 2014 by the leaders of Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Russia, and came into force on January 1, 2015. Treaties aiming for Armenia's and Kyrgyzstan's accession to the Eurasian Economic Union were signed on October 9, 2014 and December 23 respectively. Armenia's accession treaty came into force on January 2, 2015. Although Kyrgyzstan's accession treaty will not come into force until May 2015, provided it has been ratified, it will participate in the EAEU from the day of its establishment as an acceding state. Moldova and Tajikistan are prospective members. Collective Security Treaty Organization. 7 CIS member states, namely Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Armenia, have enhanced their military cooperation, establishing the Collective Security Treaty Organization, this being an expansion of the previous Collective Security Treaty. Uzbekistan, which withdrew from the CST in 1999, joined Guam. Then in 2005, it withdrew from Guam and joined the CSTO in 2006. On June 28, 2012, Uzbekistan suspended its membership in the CSTO. North Atlantic Treaty Organization. 3 former Soviet states are members of NATO: Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Georgia, where both public opinion and the ruling government favor NATO membership, is in the intensified dialogue program with NATO. Ukraine also declared joining NATO as its geopolitical goal once again in 2017, after the presidency of Viktor Yanukovych, during which the government officially declared neutrality and ceased to seek NATO membership. Other states in the Partnership for Peace and Individual Partnership Action Plan program include Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Guam. 4 member states, namely Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, and Moldova, established the Guam Group that was largely seen as intending to counter Russian dominance in the region. Notably, these 4 nations do not participate in any of the other regional organizations that sprang up in the region since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Union State. The Union State of Russia and Belarus was originally formed on April 2, 1996 under the name Commonwealth of Russia and Belarus, before being tightened further on December 8, 1999. It was initiated by the President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. On paper, the Union of Russia and Belarus intends further integration, beyond the scope of mere cooperation, including the introduction of the ruble as a common currency. Other regional organizations. Economic Cooperation Organization. The Economic Cooperation Organization was originally formed in 1985 by Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan, but in 1992 the organization was expanded to include Afghanistan and the 6 primarily Muslim former Soviet republics: Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. Community for Democracy and Rights of Nations. The post-Soviet disputed states of Abkhazia, Artsakh, South Ossetia, and Transnistria are all members of the Community for Democracy and Rights of Nations, which aims to forge closer integration. Community of Democratic Choice. The Community of Democratic Choice was formed in December 2005 at the primary instigation of Ukraine and Georgia, and composed of 6 post-Soviet states and 3 other countries of Eastern and Central Europe. The Black Sea Forum is a closely related organization. Observer countries include Armenia, Bulgaria, and Poland. Just like Guam before it, this forum is largely seen as intending to counteract Russian influence in the area. This is the only international forum centered in the post-Soviet space in which the Baltic countries also participate. In addition, the other 3 post-Soviet states in it are all members of Guam. Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is composed of China and 5 post-Soviet states, namely Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. The organization was founded in 2001, though its predecessor, the Shanghai Five grouping, has existed since 1996. Its aims revolve around security-related issues such as border demarcation, terrorism, and energy. Economic Cooperation Organizations. Central European Free Trade Agreement with Moldova provides in Western Europe for non-EU members. This alliance an economical organization with strong cooperation with the European Union, for countries that do not want to participate in Eurasic centered on Russia but that are seeking alliances to the West. Even if Moldova is the only CEFTA country that is still within a weakening CIS, it no longer participates to the CSTO for most of the common security policy but can still benefit from the free trade area, notably with Romania and Bulgaria. Black Sea economic cooperation with Russia, Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Moldova, Turkey, Albania, Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Armenia. The European Union with the 3 Baltic countries that were the first ones to declare independence from the former USSR have never joined CIS after the collapse of USSR. Political integration and security alliances. Stability Pact for Southeastern Europe with Moldova. This organization largely cooperates with NATO, and is related to the group of observers at Western European Union. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, for Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Central European countries that have also joined the EU. The other remaining countries are those part of the former Yugoslavia, but their recent conflict and political tensions still does not allow them to cooperate efficiently for their political integration and for their mutual security. In addition, they still do not have full sovereignty in this domain. They still need to find an internal stability, and they can collaborate economically with the help of other organizations focusing on economy or political cooperation and development. However, a more limited cooperation for security is possible through their membership to the larger Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. The only exception is Belarus, that still rejects political integration, and all security alliances with NATO, OSCE, WEU or other countries in Europe other than Russia. Organizations in other domains. Other organizations. Apart from above, the former Soviet republics also hold membership in a number of multinational organizations such as FIBA, FIFA, International Ice Hockey Federation, International Olympic Committee, International Paralympic Committee, Continental Hockey League, UNESCO, World Health Organization, World Trade Organization. Politics. Regarding political freedom in the former Soviet republics, Freedom House's 2021 report listed the following: Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania as free countries. Armenia, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine were listed as partly free. Azerbaijan, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan were listed as not free. Similarly, the Press Freedom Index published by Reporters Without Borders in 2022 recorded the following as regards press freedom: Estonia, good situation. Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, satisfactory situation. Armenia, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, problematic situation. Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan difficult situation. Azerbaijan, Belarus, Russia, Turkmenistan very serious situation. It has been remarked that several post-Soviet states did not change leadership for decades since their independence, such as Nursultan Nazarbayev in Kazakhstan until his surprise resignation in 2019, and Islam Karimov in Uzbekistan, until his death in September 2016. All of these had originally more limited terms but through decrees or referendums prolonged their stay in office. Askar Akayev of Kyrgyzstan had likewise served as president since its independence until he was forced to resign as a result of the Kyrgyz Revolution of 2005. Saparmurat Niyazov in Turkmenistan ruled from independence until his death in 2006, creating a personality cult around himself. His successor, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, has maintained a personality cult of his own that has replaced the worshipping of Niyazov. The issue of dynastical succession has been another element affecting the politics of some post-Soviet states. Haydar Aliyev, after constructing an extensive and ongoing cult of personality, handed the presidency of Azerbaijan to his son, Ilham Aliyev. Theories about the children of other leaders in Central Asia being groomed for succession abound. The participation of Akayev's son and daughter in the 2005 Kyrgyz parliamentary elections boosted fears of dynastic succession being used in Kyrgyzstan as well, and may have contributed to the anti-Akayev climate that led to his overthrow. Separatist conflicts. Economic, political, national, military, and social problems have all been factors in separatism in the post-Soviet space. In many cases, problems due to factors such as ethnic divisions existed before the fall of the Soviet Union, and upon the fall of the Union were brought into the open. Such territories and resulting military conflicts have so far been current self-declared states, former self-declared states, civil wars. Civil wars unrelated to separatist movements have occurred twice in the region. The Georgian Civil War between the forces of Zviad Gamsakhurdia and Eduard Shevardnadze. The war ended after Russian forces intervened in support of Shevardnadze's government, which in turn agreed to join the Commonwealth of Independent States. The Tajikistani Civil War that lasted between 1992 and 1997. Color revolutions. Since 2003, a number of peaceful color revolutions have happened in some post-Soviet states after disputed elections, with popular protests bringing into power the former opposition. The Rose Revolution in Georgia, leading to the resignation of Eduard Shevardnadze. The Orange Revolution in Ukraine, bringing into power Viktor Yushchenko and toppling the pro-Russian leader Viktor Yanukovych. The Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan, leading to the resignation of Askar Akayev. The Velvet Revolution in Armenia, leading to the resignation of Serge Sargsyan. Russian population in post-Soviet states. There is a significant Russophone population in most of the post-Soviet states, whose political position as an ethnic minority varies from country to country. While Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan, in addition to Russia, have kept Russian as an official language, the language lost its status in other post-Soviet states after the end of the Soviet Union. It maintains semi-official status in all CIS member states, because it is the organization's official working language, but in the three Baltic states, the Russian language is not recognized in any official capacity. Georgia, since its departure from the CIS in 2009, has begun operating its government almost exclusively in the Georgian language. Religion. While the Soviet system placed severe restrictions on religious intellectual life, traditions continued to survive. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Islamic movements have emerged alongside ethnic and secular ones. Vitaly Nomkin gives the following assessment: throughout the time of change, Islam has served as a symbol of identity, a force for mobilization, and a pressure for democracy. This is one of the few social disasters that the Church has survived, in which it was not the cause. But if successful politically, it faces economic challenges beyond its grasp. The Central Asian states plus Azerbaijan in the southern Caucasus are Muslim, except for their dwindling Russian and other European minorities. The Baltic countries are historically Western Christian, which adds another layer of pro-Western orientation to those countries, although the majority of what has been the traditionally Protestant population there is now relatively irreligious. The dominant religion in the other former Soviet countries is Eastern Orthodox Christianity. In most countries, religiosity has increased since the Soviet collapse. LGBT rights. LGBT people may encounter difficulties not shared by non-LGBT residents. In Transnistria, homosexuality is illegal. In some other regions, such as Russia and Ukraine, homosexual actions are legal, but there is still discrimination and bias towards the gay community. Environment. The Soviet Union inherited environmental problems from the pre-revolutionary era that it blamed on the failings and evils of capitalism. The Soviet Union promoted environmental sentiments, it had a constitutional clause on environmental protection and promoted the idea that, by ending capitalism, environmental problems would cease to arise. Some environmental strides were made, such as the banning of lead-based paint and leaded gasoline in the 20th century. However, the prioritization of industrial production over environmental protection meant that many environmental issues were left to post-Soviet institutions, particularly air and water pollution in the northern regions where industrialism was heaviest. The northern countries of Central Europe, including Poland, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia, formed what is referred to as the Black Triangle due to their heavy use of brown coal for energy. Environmental degradation in the former Soviet Union is attributed to rapid industrialization and a lack of institutions that were able to curb pollution levels. Many republics of the Soviet Union experienced soil degradation due to collective farming in the 1970s. A Soviet study revealed vast technological inefficiencies in the USSR. Compared to the West, the USSR created double the amount of pollutants for each product produced, and quadruple the amount of pollution for each car. The Soviet regime also withheld information regarding the environmental problems facing them, and when these problems became evident to the public, authorities continued to attribute them to capitalism. The Chernobyl disaster was a turning point in which the Soviets had to take responsibility for a huge environmental disaster amid pressures to disclose information regarding its causes and consequences, and this led to a broader discussion about the state of the environment as well as to concerns about nuclear energy. As general unrest grew in the final years of the Soviet Union, the public began to demand environmental reform as part of their resistance to communism. Many citizens wanted to capitalize on the political turnover to achieve an environmentalist agenda. There was a push away from coal and towards cleaner forms of energy in the 1980s, and 1986–1987 saw the first wave of environmental protests. Village prose literature by authors such as Valentin Rasputin fostered an environmentalist sentiment. The Soviet Green Front was a populist environmental movement that had 5 subgroups: the Social Ecological Union, which promoted environmental solutions based in ecological practice; the Ecological Union, which advocated for greater monitoring of pollution; the Ecological Foundation, that sought to create funds through pollution taxes; the Ecological Society of the Soviet Union, that called for a return to the Russian way of life that was closely connected to nature; and the All-Union Movement of Greens, which was a culminating body of the 4 preceding groups. Russian oil drilling and the military were among the things they took issue with. Critics of the Green Front opposed their effects on the chemical industry and claimed that it led to reduced commercial product availability of items such as soap, which was in very short supply in the late 1980s, and restricted access to pharmaceutical goods. It was expected that the transition to post-Soviet society would bring about environmental change from both democratic governments and NGOs, but the dissolution of the Soviet Union had both positive and negative effects on the environment. Transition brought about numerous changes that had both positive and negative environmental effects. The abandonment of croplands following dissolution of the Soviet Union led to the creation of carbon sinks. Industrial activity drastically decreased, which reduced air pollution even as the economy took an upturn. However, the introduction of a capitalist market caused new environmental problems. The increase in privately owned cars and the infrastructure changes to accommodate them, the increase in consumerism with no waste management to handle its byproducts, and the poorly planned construction of retail sites. Environmental cleanup efforts by post-Soviet regimes included institutional changes through the creation of or reformation of environmental agencies, and legislative changes through the introduction of new environmental regulations and their enforcement. However, some contend that the efficacy of these reforms was curtailed by economic troubles in the 1990s. New environmental standards were sometimes used by governments to lower pre-existing ones, and many of the post-Soviet initiatives have been criticized as neoliberal for their basis in free market principles and belief that the market would correct for environmental problems. Technological innovation was generally directed towards end-of-pipe technologies, which deal with the cleanup of emissions and their byproducts rather than the reduction of emissions. Non-governmental environmental organizations did not exist under the Soviet Union. Rather, some republics had state and local institutions for environmental oversight where citizens could voice concerns, but open criticism of the state was prohibited. Conservation brigades, otherwise known as družiny, engaged in preservationist and recreational outdoor activities. However, environmental damage and openings in political freedom in the 1980s led to greater grassroots activism. The Chernobyl disaster of 1986, its cover-up by national, republic and local government officials, and its environmental and health effects spurred many to action. General dissatisfaction with the socialist regime and a push for democratization took an environmental focus. As Soviet citizens became more comfortable with the Gorbachev-era ideals of glasnost and perestroika in the late 20th century, environmentalists became more outspoken in their demands, and radical splinter groups formed in the late 1980s. The opening of borders led to the spread of ideas and partnership with international environmental NGOs who were able to visit and converse with environmentalists of post-Soviet nations. The conservation state institutions from the Soviet era continued to exist into the post-Soviet era but experienced difficulty getting funding due to their connection with the socialist regime in national memory. New environmental NGOs had challenges receiving funding as well as organizing, and the NGOs that survived were not as influential on national decision-making as the state. Many NGOs expressed disappointment with the lack of substantial environmental change during times of political transformation. It has also been contended that environmental issues are of little importance to Russian citizens today. Many former Soviet citizens abandoned their earlier interest in the environment after the achievement of independence, while continued demands for environmental reform were suppressed. Russia, Ukraine, Central Asia, Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Health. Post-Soviet nostalgia. Ever since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, a certain number of people have expressed a longing for the Soviet period and its values. The level of post-Soviet nostalgia varies across the former republics. For example, certain groups of people may blend the Soviet and post-Soviet experience in their daily lives. A 2009 Pew Research Center poll showed that 62% of Ukrainians felt that their lives were worse off after 1989, when free markets were made dominant. A follow-up poll by Pew Research Center in 2011 showed that 45% of Lithuanians, 42% of Russians, and 34% of Ukrainians approved of the change to a post-Soviet market economy. According to July 2012 polling in Ukraine by rating, 42% of respondents supported the formation of a unified state of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. Earlier in 2012 this support had been 48%. A 2016 poll of Russian citizens conducted by Levada Center showed that the majority viewed the collapse of the USSR negatively and felt that it could have been avoided, and an even greater number would openly welcome a revival of the Soviet system. A 2018 poll showed that 66% of Russians regretted the collapse of the USSR, setting a 15-year record. The majority were people older than 55. A 2019 poll found that 59% of Russians felt that the Soviet government took care of ordinary people. Joseph Stalin's favorability also hit record highs that same year. Characteristics of regionalization. Various regional structures have emerged in the post-Soviet geography, which is fragmented in political and geopolitical terms. The first of these was the Independent State Society, which included former Soviet countries outside the Baltic countries. The failure of the CIS to meet the foreign policy needs of many post-Soviet countries has set the stage for a new regional integration. At the initiative of Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, and Moldova, a Guam organization was established in Strasbourg on October 10, 1997. The purpose and principles of the organization were determined at the first summit of Guam on June 7, 2001 in Yalta. The countries participating in the Guam aimed to maintain their national independence and sovereignty and to increase their maneuverability against Russia.